turning your Bibles with me to the book of Habakkuk. Book of Habakkuk. That's where we're going to be today. And as you're turning there, I want to share with you something that happened back in history in 1715, France. King Louis the 14th had reigned for 72 years. And he died. Well, during his reign, he was so into himself. He didn't refer to himself by his name. He referred to himself as the Great. And he wanted everybody else to refer to him as the Great. And his court was the most opulent in all of Europe. It was just incredible. But when he died, he gave some specific instructions about how the funeral memorial service was supposed to be carried out. One, he was to be placed in a gold coffin. So they did that. Also, he didn't want any lights, any candles lit in the chapel except for one special candle at the head of his casket, signifying just how great he really was. Thousands of people met in hushed silence as this incredibly opulent and extravagant procession began. The preacher came up to do the memorial, and as he began to speak softly, he reached out and he snuffed out the light, and he said, "Only God is great." And then he began. And that is so significant for us today as we look into the book of Habakkuk, because it's the lesson of his life. The book of Habakkuk is a dialogue between man, or the prophet, and the Lord. And he did ask a lot of questions. It's a very unique prophecy book in the Bible. It's actually a conversation or a dialogue between the two of them. In that dialogue, we get as much doctrinal truth about God as almost any other book in the Bible. And it's only 3 chapters. It is incredible. But he questions God about God's seemingly lack of involvement. There's a lot going on. And he asks questions that we ask in the recess of our hearts. We ask things like, where is God in all of this? How could an all-powerful, all-loving God let sin, evil, and corruption and injustice go unpunished? We ask these questions. Why do bad things happen to good people? Why do good things happen to bad people? If God is so good, then why does he let evil run rampant? These are questions that we hear today. These are the questions that Habakkuk, the man of God, was asking directly to the Lord. And he is in this situation. He is incredibly stressed out. He's incredibly anxious. He's fearful of the future. There's a lot going on. And he experiences exactly the same kind of stuff that you and I experience every single day. The stress of the unknown, the pressures, the anxiety that comes. It's incredible. I got a question. How many of you can relate to this guy? How many of you feel like this guy on a regular basis? Oh my goodness, he looks like he's had a tough day. He's a little stressed out, a little anxious, a little not himself. And we're like that sometimes, whether it's because of things happening at home, the job, out in the community, pick up a newspaper, turn on the television, go to the internet, wherever you go, it's like this recipe for anxiety. With that comes fear and stress and all kinds of junk that comes along with it. There's probably not a single person in this room who has not experienced a day when you felt just like this guy. Just out of your mind. Well, Habakkuk feels like that right here. And Habakkuk begins to ask God some questions. Actually, he begins by complaining and asking God questions. And we learn some significant aspects about God, but we also get the antidote to anxiety. Not a pill, it's not a drink, not a vacation, it's not some kind of new age. We get a very, very specific antidote to anxiety. And you can follow along in your notes. We're going to go through them. Each one, we learn something about God. So we're going to start right off here. God is always at work in and around us. God is sovereign. God is always at work in and around us. God is sovereign. Look at Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 5. First of all, Habakkuk asks a bunch of questions. And then this is how God answers him. He says, "Look among the nations and see, wonder and be astounded. For I am doing a work in your days that you would not believe if told. Now, let me set the foundation here, the background here. The great Assyrian Empire has just been conquered. Nineveh, remember we talked to Jonah a few weeks ago, and Nineveh was the New York, the Paris, the London, the big city of the day. And this is about 100 years after they experienced a revival. Well, they went back the other way, and Nineveh was destroyed. It was fallen. The northern kingdom of Israel had fallen and was taken captive. Egypt had fallen, and the Chaldeans, or the Babylonians, Babylon, was knocking on the door to the southern kingdom of Judah. And they were ready to conquer. No one has been able to stand before this army. As a matter of fact, we read in chapter 2 of Habakkuk that they laughed, the armies laughed at the kings, laughed at the empires, laughed at the gated cities, the walls around. They laughed at it because it was like nothing to them. They were like a tsunami coming and just wiped out every single thing. There was no opposition. We find out why in a little bit, but God is saying that He's at work in and around us. Habakkuk is anxious to say the least. He's fearful. He asks why God has allowed the destruction that has taken place. He's wondering why God hasn't answered any of his prayers. Have you ever been there? Have you ever wondered why God hasn't answered your prayer yet? No doubt we all have things that we've been praying about, thinking, okay, God answers prayers, but when in the world is it going to happen for me? Right? We're in church, so we can be honest today. Okay? You ever experience that? You ever feel like you're banging your knees against the floor, Lord, and you wonder, why hasn't He answered my prayers? I'm a good guy. I'm a good gal. I follow the Lord. He's a good God. Why hasn't He done anything yet? Why is this still here? You ever been there? I know I have. That's where Habakkuk is. Now, Habakkuk believed in God. He loved God. But he had doubts about God's intentions. He even had doubts about God's love for the people. That's a pretty tough place to be. He's asking God, where are you? Why aren't you doing it? Basically, in other words, he says, God, why aren't you cleaning up this mess? That's what it comes down to in chapter 1. God, why aren't you cleaning up this mess? This actually happened at my house last week. I know it sounds, but last week, my son, my 7-year-old, Johnny, and I were going downstairs to the playroom, and Johnny, we get down there, and his toys were everywhere. And Johnny said, wow, this place is a mess. I said, yeah, Johnny, you're right, man. Your toys are everywhere. He does one of these things. He goes like this. He doesn't even have anything on his chin, but he does it anyway. He said, Dad, when are you going to clean this mess up? That was a great opportunity for a teaching session there. But don't we do that? Think about it. If God is so good, how many of you have ever heard somebody say, if God is so loving and He's all powerful, why doesn't He fix the world? You ever hear that question? If I had a nickel for every time someone who had a problem with God asked me that question, I would have at least $20. It's a nickel. It's only a nickel. Give me a break. Okay? But I get that question a lot. If God is so great, and God is so good, and God is so powerful, and God is so loving, why hasn't He cleaned up this mess? Well, they ask it all the time. Why hasn't God done something about death and sin? And He already has. That's what drives me nuts. 2,000 years ago, He already did. He already cleaned up our mess 2,000 years ago. How many of you realize, how many of you know or believe that God left heaven 2,000 years ago, was born in Bethlehem, took on the form of a human being, Jesus the Christ, lived the perfect life for around 33 and a half years, didn't do anything wrong, sinless, went to the cross, died, 3 days later rose again, and ascended into heaven. How many of you already know that story? Okay. What did He do at the cross? What did He defeat? Anybody know? Death. What did He defeat with the empty tomb? What did He defeat with that time? What are some of the things that He defeated? Death. What else? Sin. What else? Who else did He defeat? Devil. Evil. Flesh. The world system. He defeated it all, right? We know that, right? You guys are good. You guys are right on the ball. And you know I'm setting you up. Okay? If He did all that, then why is the world still broken? Why does it seem like evil is winning? Why are we still spinning out of control? Where is God in all of this? If he did what we read in this book, if he really did that, then what's going on today? If we have victory, how many of you know this? This book says a child of God has victory. You know that, right? If we have victory, then why is the world still spinning out of control? These are the questions that we ask. This is the question Habakkuk asks. And then God does something that is nothing short of mind-blowing. He answers this question. This whole situation of why everything's happening. Basically, Habakkuk says, why haven't you cleaned up our mess? Now, that was before the cross. God is planning on doing something. We're looking backwards. We know he's already had, but we still ask. We're not very bright. We still ask the same questions. Okay? So, what did he do here? God gave Habakkuk a revelation, not an explanation. And my goodness, if you write that down, I guarantee you'll come back to it. He did not give Habakkuk an explanation. He went another step. He gave him a revelation. What did he do? God took Habakkuk to the place that he needed to be. He needed a refreshed, renewed, and revived vision of who God is. Because in the end, I want so much to jump to the last chapter because it's been consuming me for the last month. Okay? But and you have to bear with me. I'm a little kooky today because I keep wanting to get to the last chapter. Because the last verses in the last chapter, we're not going to go there yet. Bear with me. Okay? I'm sorry. But listen to what he said. He says, look at the verse. He says, Habakkuk, look among the nations and see, wonder and be astounded, for I am doing a work in your days that you would not believe if told. What he does here, in other words, he says, open your eyes, Habby. I'm working, man. I'm doing stuff so much you can't even begin to comprehend the intricacies of what I'm doing. He says, you have no clue, Habakkuk. He says, you're complaining about this Babylonian army? Guess what? I'm the one in charge of them. I put them there, he says. This blows Habakkuk's mind. Because this army, first of all, the Assyrians were incredible warriors. And this army mowed them over like they weren't even standing there. It was sad and pathetic. And, later on in the chapter we see God actually describes what they're like. Their horses are as fast as jaguars, and it's like they're flying. And God says, I gave them that. I built that army. I put that together. Habakkuk, you have no clue how intricate my plan is. What he's showing Habakkuk is that he is at work in things that he has no clue about. And we have that, we had that a little bit later on too. In John chapter 5, verse 17, it says, Jesus answered them, my Father is working until now, and I am working. What does that mean? That means, Neil, in your life, right this second, God's working. You don't even realize it. He's working. Marcy, right now, this second, while you're sitting here wondering if I'm going to shut up or not, no, I know that, no. He's working. He's working in your heart. He's working in yours. Sammy, he's working in He's working in the governments of the world. He's working in and we think, the world is just out of control. The world is not out of control. Let me straighten this out. The world is not out of control. God is in complete control. And God is working in every single minute detail of life. And he shows this to Habakkuk. And he shows this to his disciples. And he shows it to Job. We go back to Job. It's the same technique for anxiety control that he does with Job. Well, at the beginning of Job, he's not doing well. Okay? If you think you got something to complain about in your life's a party compared to Job's. My life's a party compared to what happened with Job. And Job is going on, and he begins to become Mr. Crunchy Pants. He begins to complain and question, and he never curses God, ever. But he gets close. And he questions this and he questions that, and he's trying to defend himself. And then in chapters 37 through 41, God gave Job a revelation, not an explanation. See, an explanation is kind of like one of those little pat answers. We do it sometimes with our kids. My kids have this game on their little computer thing, and they got to spell things, and, they ask me, and I can't even spell my name sometimes. So I give them a quick answer, and then Angela fixes it. Okay? I say, I spell like this, this, and this. And then in a sweet voice, she goes, well, honey, actually there's an extra T in there. Okay, great. And I give them that pat explanation and they're gone. God says, no, I'm going to give you so much more. I'm going to reveal myself to you. I'm going to show you who I am. And that's what he does with Job. He gives a bunch of questions to Job later on that demonstrates who he is. And look at what Job says in chapter 42, verse 5. He said, I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see you. What happens? Job's situation did not change. Okay? Job still was missing out on his family, his health, his friends, his resources. But he says this, I thought I knew you, but not even close. But now that you've revealed yourself to me, now I know. God's saying, I am God to Habakkuk, to Job, to you and me. I'm so at work in every detail of every one of your lives. If I were to tell you, look at verse 5 of Habakkuk chapter 1. If I were to tell you, you wouldn't even believe it. That's how much I'm involved, he says. That is incredible. How many of you like to travel? Okay. If you ever, and not that it's a travel place, a vacation spot, but if you ever end up in Greenland, okay, I know it's not green, it's full of ice. Why would we go there? If you went there, you'd see something pretty incredible. Out in the water, there are thousands of icebergs. Some small, some massive. And if you take a couple of minutes and you look, you'll see that the small ones are moving in one direction, and the big massive ones are moving sometimes in the exact opposite direction. The explanation is simple. The winds that blow this way and that way are moving the small ones along the water. Yeah, they're little floats. And the wind's just kind of blowing them wherever the wind blows. The massive ones are so massive, it's so deep, they reach so deep down that the currents of the ocean, the strong currents of the ocean, are moving them in a direction. Your life and my life is so totally like that. The winds that blow us this way and that way that we can't control, if we allow them to control us, we're going to be here, there, and everywhere, and our anxiety is going to be up. But if we're rooted in the fact that God is working in our lives, and that other force that we know He's working, He's moving us in a direction that He wants us to go, regardless of what the wind's blowing this way, that way, or anywhere it's going. It's incredible. God's saying Habakkuk, God's saying Job, God's saying Norb, God's saying Woodland Valley Church, I'm at work in every detail. I am sovereign, He says. I am on the throne. You do not have to be scared about what's going to happen tomorrow because I'm already there. You understand? God's eternal. He's infinite. He's not waiting for tomorrow to come. He's already there waiting for you and I to catch up to Him. That's the kind of God that we have. And He tells Habakkuk this, and Habakkuk begins to slowly understand. But he has more questions. And we learn something else about God here. Something that in the area that I grew up was unheard of. And it's our second point here. God can handle our questions and our doubts. I was always told growing up, never question God. Never, ever go to God with a complaint. You doubt? Oh, we got to fix that. God can handle our questions. God is secure. God's in control. Look at the question Habakkuk goes to him with. This question is big. He says, are you not from everlasting, O Lord my God, my Holy One? We shall not die. O Lord, you have ordained them as a judgment, and you, O rock, have established them for reproof. And he goes on. He says, you who are of purer eyes than to see evil, and cannot look up at wrong. Hey, listen to this now. This borders on the line of scary. I even have a little bit of trouble even reading it. Why do you idly look at traitors and remain silent when the wicked swallows up the man more righteous than he? This is what Habakkuk's doing. Habakkuk, God, look at who I am and look at who we are. Why are you just sitting back and letting things happen? He questions God. Now, Habakkuk knew the Lord. He loved the Lord. He believed in the Lord. Yet he has some questions, some doubts. We have a standing requirement here at Woodland Valley Church, because I know I've been to churches where you're not allowed to say anything, do anything. If you move the wrong way, part your hair the wrong way, tie your tie the wrong way, you're not in. You're not in the in group. Okay? Can't ask questions. You can't doubt. You can't question the pastor at all. God forbid. Okay? We have a standing requirement. I see some visitors here today. We want to welcome you. You got to know something right off the bat in order to be able to enter the doors We like to say that we welcome everybody. That's not true, is it, Chris? We don't welcome everybody. We have a requirement. It's true. It's true. We have a requirement here. Okay? Here's our requirement. Do not check your brain at the door. Okay? That's our standing requirement here. That's what we say. We want you to be thinking this should be a place of holy curiosity. This should be the place where you feel free and safe to ask the questions that we've been talking about. The questions that some people say, we shouldn't be questioning that. We shouldn't be. Absolutely not. In other words, we don't expect a blind, dumb, unquestioning faith. We believe what our Bible says. A couple weeks ago, we looked at the Great Commandment here in Mark chapter 12, verse 30. You shall love the Lord thy God with what? All your what? Passion. With all your what? Soul. With all your what? Mind. And with all your strength. Wait a minute. So God actually does want me to use a softball-sized 3-pound lump of flesh in my head? Yeah. Of course He does. That's how we know Him. That's how we grow in Him. That's how we worship Him. Unfortunately, people have this erroneous view of the church being a place of closed-minded, intellectually weak, no questions asked, black hole. Not true. Not true. On the contrary, we serve the one who has all the answers. I mean, think about that. God has all the answers. If you can't ask the questions here, where can you? Right? So we see here with Habakkuk and what he's asking here in these tough questions, we see that God can handle our questions and our doubts. He can handle them all. It kind of, why do we ask questions in the first place? Anybody know? To get the answers, right. We ask questions to get the answers. There was a 7-year-old boy who began peppering his dad with questions one day. And you guys know what that's like. Question after question after. Anybody have a son like that or a daughter like that? Question after question after question after question, yeah. Well, and, if you're like this dad, you can't answer hardly any of them. Okay? He asked, Dad, why is the sky blue? I don't know, son, he said. Dad, why is the grass green? I don't know that one either, son. Dad, if the earth is spinning, here's one, I want to know this one. If the earth is spinning, why don't we get dizzy? Dad said, oh, that's a good question, son. I don't know. He goes on and on. He says, Dad, why doesn't the moon fall down? What's keeping it there? He's like, wow, son, I don't know. Good question, though, I don't know. So this goes on for some time. And the boy finally says, Dad, do you mind me asking these questions? And the dad smiled and said, not at all, son. How are you ever going to learn anything if you don't ask questions? The difference is, our Heavenly Father has all the answers. He can answer our questions. He can reveal Himself to us. And let's go back to Job. Job was in a terrible state. He got crunchy. He started questioning God. The Lord did not crush him, did not snuff him out when He questioned him. You notice that, right? Instead, He revealed Himself to Job through a series of over 70 questions that described who God is in His majesty and in His greatness. And it changed everything for Job. Take a look at Job 40, verses 3 and 4. Then Job answered the Lord and said, Behold, I am of small account. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand upon my mouth. In other words, he was speechless at the glory and majesty that God just revealed to him. He didn't just say, okay, Job, here's your answer, boom, boom, boom. Okay, now go play, kid. He didn't do that. Instead, he took time from chapters 37 through 41 and asked a bunch of questions, and the questions were questions that Job had no answer to. But what they were doing was they were showing just who God was. He was asking questions like, Job, where were you when I created the heavens and the earth? Oh yeah, that's right, God. You created the heavens and the earth. Job, where were you when I put Leviathan in the ocean? Oh yeah, that's right. You have control over that too. Job, how do I make the winds move around the earth? Oh, that's right. You're controlling the weather. Job, how did you know how to make the streams and the rivers and the tides? Oh yeah, that's right, God. You are incredible. You are incredible. And that's what He does here with Job. Job was speechless at the majesty of God. The Lord doesn't owe us an explanation. We meaning humans, get all important. And we think, I've had people say, when I get to heaven, I got a couple of questions I'm going to ask God. Really? I can't wait to be there and to see that. because I really want to see how you're going to be able to ask him anything when he reveals who he is to you and you realize, oh, my questions are stupid. I cannot wait to see that. But that's what goes on here. God's love for us moves him to reveal himself in our darkest times of need. And I got a little box. If you look at your notes, sometimes people say, well, how do you question God? Well, God can handle our questions and our doubts, but we do kind of have to go to him in a certain way. No, not a religious way. No, not jumping through hoops. These are more principles of a way to go to him. First of all, go directly to God. Okay? You don't have to come to me. You don't have to say, hey, Pastor, I got a question for God. You think you can ask him next time you have a meeting with him? If you do that, what am I going to say to you? You have a meeting with him. You ask him the question. Because I got my own questions. Habakkuk got on his knees, took the question before the throne of God first. He didn't listen to the latest expert blaspheming God on the radio. He went directly to God, to the King himself. We can do that. Hebrews 4:16. Let us therefore come boldly. That word boldly means what? Cocky? Confidently. Not cocky, but confidently, knowing that we're allowed into our Father's throne room. Come boldly to the throne of grace that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. God says, I want you to come on in. Bring me your questions, but come to me. I have the answers for you. So, first and foremost, we go directly to God. Secondly, we have to ask from a humble heart. Habakkuk doesn't crash in on God, demand answers with arrogance and pride. He actually uses terms like this when he's referring to God in this question and answer time. O Lord, my God, my Holy One, my rock, God of my salvation, the Lord who is my strength. Habakkuk had some tough questions for God. From our perspective, tough. But he went there meek and humble, realizing whose presence he was in. Do you realize when we get in the presence of God, the physical, actual, literal presence of God, can you even begin to comprehend what that's going to be like? I mean, talk about speechless. Talk about Job, like Job putting his hand over his mouth. We're going to see God face to face. And there's that song, Brian, I Can Only Imagine. Incredible song. And this guy he's figuring, what am I going to do when I see him? Am I going to get on my knees? Am I going to get on my face? Am I going to be able to do anything at all? Am I going to praise him? Am I going to be speechless? And he doesn't know. He's going through all these things about what's it going to be like to see God. Well, I know one thing. We are going to be humbled before him. And we need to go before him in humility. Take a look at Isaiah chapter 57, verse 15. It says, thus says the high and lofty one that inhabits eternity. Right there we can stop. I mean, listen, did you hear that? Listen to it. Thus says the high and lofty one that inhabits eternity. He encompasses it. He is eternal and infinite and, oh my goodness. And then it goes on. Whose name is holy. I dwell in the high and holy place. With him also that is now he's talking about us now. That is of a contrite, the word contrite means broken. That is a contrite and humble spirit. To revive the spirit of the humble and to revive the heart of the contrite ones. What's he saying? He's saying, yeah, I am exactly who you think I am and beyond. And I'm going to inhabit heaven with you if you have a humble and contrite heart. If you come to me with arrogance and pride, it's not going to go well for you, he's saying. So we've got questions for God. God can handle them. We go before him with a humble heart. How many of you have a child that's ever questioned a decision of yours? Anybody? Oh, okay, I'm not alone. When my child, or when one of my children come to me with a humble heart and ask me about a decision, I'm much more apt to listen and dialogue with them and maybe even acquiesce, depending on what it is. If they come to me all snippy and snappy and snotty, I can get snippy, snappy, and snotty too. I just said that 3 times fast. That was good. I can do it too. And it's not going to go well. And guess what? I'm the king of this house. So if it's not going to go well, it's not going to go well for you, little guy or little girl. But when they come to me with that meek, gentle, humble spirit, I'm like butter in their hands. My daughter actually calls me softy sometimes. And I try to fight that and say, I'm not soft. She says, yeah, Daddy, you are. If I come to you nice, you're soft. You're 12 years old, you figured me out. Okay. But think about that. Where's that principle come from? God says, come to me with a humble and contrite heart. I'll listen to you. I'll talk with you. I'll hear what you got to say. Come to me that way. And then, probably the toughest one is that last one. Wait patiently for the answer. We hate that P word. It's horrible. It's disgusting. Listen to what Habakkuk does. Look at what he does in Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 1. This is after he asks his questions, the second round of questions. I will stand upon my watch and set me upon the tower, and I will watch and see what he will say to me. He says, God, here's my question. Now I'm going to wait for the answer. Wow. It sounds so simple, yet it's so profound. Because we want what we want it now, right? We're in this fast food, quick fix society where, hey, you want, what's that thing that you guys do on your phone to get an answer? What's the name of that thing? Cha-cha, thank you. Okay, cha-cha. You got a question? There's the answer. Okay, I'm good. You go your way, right? Get on the internet. I want to know what's going on. There it is. You're done. Hey, you're hungry. You drive through. There it is. You're done. Right? God says, you lost the ability to wait and patiently wait and listen to what I have to say to you. He says, wait. Habakkuk says, okay, you just reveal yourself to me. You reveal that you're at work around me. You reveal also you can handle my questions and my doubts. Now I'm just going to sit here and wait until you give me an answer, Lord. It is incredible. And then God answers him. And listen to what God says. This is probably, if we can grab a hold of this, we're going a long way. In verse 3, God says, the vision is yet for an appointed time. In other words, God's not going by our schedule, but he is going by a schedule. It's his. But at the end, it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. What's he saying? He's saying, Habakkuk, you've asked me some questions. I got the answer for you. Habakkuk's big question was about Babylon. Lord, aren't you going to judge Babylon? What's going on with Babylon? Why is Babylon so powerful? Why are they going to do... God says, hold on. I got the answer, but you have to wait for it. You don't understand the intricacies of my plan. The answer is coming, and it's not going to be late. It's not going to be early. It's going to be right when I want it to be. God is sovereign. God is secure. He can handle our questions, but we need to go to him. Sometimes, you ever have somebody to ask you a question, and before you give them the answer, they turn and they walk away? Or you're on the phone. It happens a lot to me. I'm talking on the phone, and they ask me a question, and they hang up. Or they get cut off. Or it's like, why'd you ask me a question? Or they come to you with a question with the answer that they want. You don't give them the answer they want. They don't even hear you, and they ask the question again. That ever happened to you? It happens to me all the time. I don't know. It's crazy. But God says, wait patiently. I will give you the answer. It's coming. Wait. God can handle our questions. The question is, are we willing to wait for the answers? Sometimes I think we need to be like Job and just kind of put our hands over our mouth and just wait, like Habakkuk. Okay, then we come to the final part. This part has been consuming me, and I hope it does the same to you. If all we have is God, then we have it all. In other words, God is sufficient. And that sounds so simple. That sounds so basic. And it is. That's the beauty of it. Take a look at what he says here. He says, Habakkuk responds, this is the end of the chapter, the end of the conversation. He says, I hear. God answers him question. He says what he's going to do with the Babylonians, what he's going to do with the Babylonians conquering Judah. Okay? And listen to what he says. He says, I hear and my body trembles. My lips quiver at the sound. Rottenness enters my bones. My legs tremble beneath me. Yet I will quietly wait for the day of trouble to come upon the people who invade us. This is what he's saying. Lord, I see what you're going to do. It's terrifying. The world is a broken place. This is a scary place to be. It's a scary time to live. Now, this is the man of God. I'm trembling down to my bones. And look what else happens here. Though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food, the flocks be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls. He's saying, I know what's coming, Lord. You just showed me what's coming. And even if all of this stuff happens exactly the way you say it, no more food, pestilence, livestock dying, being conquered by this nation, war. He comes to the final conclusion, and this verse completely staggered my world the last 3-4 weeks. Take a look. Yet, this is all going to happen. Yet, I will rejoice in the Lord. What's he going to rejoice in? What is he going to rejoice in? Is he going to rejoice in the Lord's deliverance? Is that what it says here? Is he going to rejoice in the Lord's gifts? Is he going to rejoice in the Lord's magnificent delivering them? Is that what it says? I'm going to rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in what? The things that he gives me? The blessings? No. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. Job saying, no matter what's going on in the world around me, God is still God. And as long as I have God, I've got it all. Oh my goodness. I cannot tell you how much this must have quelled Habakkuk's anxiety. No matter what happened, he realized God is sufficient. This point has staggered me. I had to answer some questions of my own these past couple of weeks that were hard. We talk about being able to bring questions to God, and, God can handle our questions. I couldn't handle my own questions. Questions like, I had to think, is God enough? I had to ask myself, is God enough? I had to ask myself, am I more thankful for the presence, the gifts of God, or the presence of God? Am I thankful for the giver or the gift? Which one's more important to me? If everything that I had was taken away and all I had was God left, would it be enough? I had to ask myself these questions this week, and I labored over, not just this week, over the past couple of weeks, and I labored over these questions. And I kept, this little tiny 3-chapter book rocked my entire world. Because I was confronted face to face with God. I had to answer the question, what am I doing? Is it real? Is it really real? Or is it all make-believe? Am I really, truly a child of God, hungering for God, loving God, or am I a shopper looking to get the benefits of God? It was a hard place. I had to ask myself, can I sing with King David? Psalm 28, verse 7. The Lord brought this to me this week. It says, the Lord is my strength and my shield. My heart trusts in him, and I am helped. Therefore my heart greatly rejoices. With my song will I praise him. David did nothing in this psalm other than praise God for God. Not the things of God, not the blessings of God, not the good stuff that happens. Am I saying it's wrong to be thankful for those things? Absolutely not. God has blessed me. If I were to sit down, if any of us sit down, we could make a list of the blessings of God in our lives. We would not be able to finish the list before we went to the grave. I guarantee that. Because so many things we take for granted. But I was confronted by God with this verse, and it was as though God was saying, yeah, Norb, you are grateful. I'll give you that. But what are you grateful for? And I wondered, if God stopped giving me stuff, would I still love him? If all I had was him, would it be enough? I've got to tell you, it was a rough place to be for a little while. Because we are in a society where it's so easy to thank God for this and to look for that and ask God to heal this and to take care of that and provide this and provide that. And I'm not saying it's wrong to do that. It is right to do that. It is right. He says, come to me, ask, and you will receive. He does say that. But I got to a place this week because of this prophet. When this prophet knew all of that was going to be taken away. The promised land gone. Food gone. Crops gone. Cattle gone. Everything gone. Maybe even his life gone. And he gets to this point, he says, wow, you just revealed yourself to me. You didn't give me an explanation. You gave me a revelation. The revelation is who you are. And I've come to the conclusion that if everything's gone and I have just you, that's enough. It's more than enough. I got the word sufficient here because it matches. It's an S. I had to get the 3 S's in there. Okay? But he's way more than just sufficient. He meets every single need, not even in the stuff that he gives, but in who he is. What an incredible place to be. Paul was taught this lesson. In 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9, he had some kind of ailment. He prayed 3 times. Lord, please remove this from me. And God responds and says, no, I'm not. He says, my grace is sufficient for thee. My strength is made perfect in weakness. So, Paul responds back, most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ rest upon me. So basically, Paul the apostle goes to God and says, hey, I'm hurting. Can you take it away? God said, no, but I'm going to give you me. And it's going to be enough. It's going to be more than enough. The problem was still there, but God was enough for Paul, who wrote later on in Philippians chapter 1:21, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. How in the world can death be gain when you leave everything behind? Think about that statement. For me to live is Christ and to die is gain. How in the world do I gain a single thing when I'm leaving every single thing behind? Because every single thing behind is temporary. They were gifts, blessings from the Lord. Great. But for me to gain, I'm going in the presence of God. And all that stuff's behind, and I'm going to realize it really didn't matter that much. So this life lesson that Habakkuk gets and that Paul gets. Paul goes on later on and says in Philippians 4:11 says, not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. That word content doesn't mean, oh, I guess this is just my lot in life, so be it. No, this word content means confidently resting in who God is and where God has you right now. It's an incredible place to be. In the end, God is sufficient. Look at what Maud Royden said. When you have nothing left but God, then you become aware that God is enough. Wow. Habakkuk knew that war, famine, pestilence, death, oppression was coming, and he was anxious. But God quelled his anxiety with his very presence. C.S. Lewis said this, he who has God and many other things has no more than he who has God alone. My goodness. And on the bottom of your notes, there's always a SMART mission. And this is what I want to encourage you to do this week. Not challenge you, not force you, not manipulate you. I want to encourage you this week to do this. Thank God for God this week. Is it wrong to thank God for the stuff that He gives you? No. But this week, please, thank God for God. Praise God just for God, just for who He is. Worship God, not for the things that He can give or the pain that He can take away, but just for who He is. Again, please, I'm going to stress, thanking God for the things that He gives is not a bad thing. It's a right and proper thing. But this week, let's follow Habakkuk's lead and just thank God for God.